Okay, welcome everybody to this episode of the Coaching Outdoors podcast. I'm up here in Scotland as always, and Anna Marie is down in Wiltshire. And today we're joined by the wonderful Lesley Roberts, and I will ask Lesley to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Oh, well, hello everybody. It's lovely to be here and thank you so much for inviting me. So as Alex said, I'm Lesley Roberts. I'm the founder of both Brave Conversations and Coaching Outdoors. The focus of those businesses is team development and leadership development, and also personal executive coaching and coaching other coaches in working outdoors. I'm Scottish originally. I'm from Glasgow, so I have a little bit of envy when I'm chatting to Alex and I hear where she's living and I can see her beautiful view. And I'm a mum. I've got a little girl. She's 6 years old. And we love being outside as much as we can. And particularly, she loves climbing trees. So if anybody's got any top tips on how to get green marks out of clothes, I am all ears.
And it's so delightful that you've mentioned your daughter and the memories that undoubtedly you will be creating with her. And setting the foundations for her as she kind of moves through her life. And one of the questions we always ask everyone who comes on the podcast as we kind of get kick-started is very much your earliest memory of being outdoors. Like, what is it? And why do you enjoy being outside so much?
Such a good question. And you're so right about the connection when you're young. So I spend a lot of time with my daughter actually, saying to her, can you hear the birds? Let's go and listen to the birds and let's look at the birds, because I want to try and give her that wonderful opportunity to connect with nature, I guess in the way that I had when I was young. But my experience, I think, is probably a bit different from hers, whereas I'm trying to introduce her to it and make sure she's got a great relationship with nature. My experience when I was a wee girl was that I didn't get on particularly well with my mum, and I was an only child. So my experiences are mainly of me sitting in the garden. I had a swing, an old-fashioned swing, and I spent a lot of time sitting on my swing in the garden because I was trying to get out of the house and away from any arguments. And I remember that being my place of sanctuary, my place where I felt safe and where I felt, I guess, content would be a good word to describe that feeling for me. And I spent hours sitting on there. And then I guess the next sort of significant experience for me was when I was in primary school, so probably the age 10 or 11. All of the schools in Scotland at the time took a week and we went to an outdoor centre for an outdoor education week. And we went to an outdoor centre called Ardronig, which was on the banks of Loch Tay. And I loved every minute of it. It was like my experience to that point had sort of been my back garden or the beach in Ayr. And suddenly it was like nature on steroids. I remember going, oh my God, there's a mountain. And we walked up some hills. I thought there were mountains. Oh my God, there's mountains. There's this massive loch. And we did all the things that you do at outdoor centres. You know, we did the abseiling and the rafting and all. We did a bit of wild swimming. And I loved that. That week gave me so much in terms of that feeling of escape and adventure. And I loved it, absolutely loved it. And then spent probably the rest of my childhood trying to recreate that. I think partly because I'd loved the experience of that wild adventure, and partly because it was that reconnection with nature and that safe place for me. And my parents weren't there on that adventure week, so I had a week away from home. I loved the routine of it. I loved the group feel with being with other people. And one of the things that I've come to realise, and this sort of dawned on me as I was writing my dissertation, because I think a bit like yourself, Alex, I've got an MSc in executive coaching, and I did it at Ashridge Business School, and we wrote our dissertations in our final year there, and our dissertation was around action research. So there was a lot of thinking about, you know, how am I, what am I reflecting on, what patterns do I see in myself, what am I noticing about myself? So It's what my husband would call navel gazing. And I realised as part of that, nature for me was a surrogate parent as I was growing up, because I didn't have the best relationship with my mum, and my dad was working, so he wasn't around very much. And I think that sort of is what's taken me on my journey throughout my life, really, is having that beginning and then having that surrogate parent experience. And I've discovered that wherever I am in life now, geographically, wherever I live, I've tried to recreate that experience that I had with my swing. So when I was a little girl, that was my safe place. That was the place that I went to. And then wherever I've moved and lived, I've had a place that's been the place that I keep going back to. So when I lived in the Peak District, it was Froggatt Edge. I lived up in Harewood, and it was the Harewood. There was a 10K walk I used to do around the Harewood estate. You know, I now live in the middle of England. I'm in Rutland, and there's Rutland Water, so that's my place. I've always had somewhere that's been my place that I've gone to. Yeah.
It's just such a lovely, thank you for being so so candid with us as well, and for sharing that, because I think a lot of people who listen to our podcasts, you know, they ask themselves the same question when they are listening, you know, what is my earliest memory of being outdoors? And everybody comes to nature in a different way. And some people, you know, actually their first memory of the outdoors is actually maybe as an adult. You know, maybe they didn't have much of an experience as a child, and maybe they come to it as an adult more. And I think everybody has that kind of that feeling of safety, whatever they're sort of feeling safe from. There's that lovely feeling of safety and just being you know, part of something bigger, and you know, feeling like you're you know, nature is such a big system which we're part of. And it's lovely to hear you describe it like that, and also that you sort of find that wherever you are now as well, wherever you are in the world, you find your special, your sort of safe place. And you mentioned a little bit there about obviously evolving that, and it would be lovely for our listeners to hear how you've turned that love for nature and those experiences as a child into your business now. So what's your backstory? How have you come from being a child who loved nature into being somebody who uses nature and partners with nature as part of your business?
Thank you. Yes, I think so. When I left school, I was pretty clear I wanted to go to university and I wanted to be a PE teacher. And I think it was the opportunity, partly about being outside a lot and doing a load of sport. And I think that element of it came through my university life very clearly. So in my degree, we had the opportunity to pick a major, and lots of people majored in, you know, a variety of things that would be considered a bit more normal for PE teachers. And I majored in outdoor education because there was an opportunity for us to do that, and in philosophy, actually. So I certainly started taking that path of how can I, you know, build my career, if you like, or my future in terms of how can I pay the mortgage, having this connection with nature. And from having done that at university, then my first teaching job was in a school where I was responsible for the outdoor. I was doing PE as well, but I was also responsible for the outdoor education element of the school curriculum in that school. And I was running their school residentials. I ran the Duke of Edinburgh scheme for them. So I was always looking for ways to try to really focus on that. And then I left teaching and I moved up to Applecross, which is up on the west coast of Scotland. And I went there to work with youth at risk. So I worked for an organisation called Venture Trust. And the work that we did up there was working with sort of young offenders or young people who are excluded from normal society. And the age group is 16 to 24. And I worked as a development tutor at Venture Trust, and we were outside all the time. So the groups that we worked with, we took those young adults for 3 weeks away from wherever they were in the UK, and we took them up to the Highlands of Scotland, and all of the work we did was personal development work with them. And I saw the phenomenal impact that it had for the groups that we worked with. And at the time, we had a non-reoffence rate of 86%. And I think nature played a big part in that. I mean, there were other elements, of course, but I think nature and their experience while they were there played a huge part in that. And then I guess I had a rock climbing accident while I was there, and I'd quite badly broken my ankle and had been put back together with bits of metal, which meant that I then couldn't do that work for a while. And a friend of mine, she had a corporate career. She had some, versus what I was earning, my goodness, she had some good financial income. She had a company car, a laptop, a mobile phone, seemed to be quite flexible in working hours. She could go and pop on the washing whenever she liked, or she could nip out to the shops. I thought, well, that sounds good. So by complete chance, there was an industry magazine called The Grocer, and it has all the job adverts in it. And I literally applied to all of them because I needed a job and I couldn't do anything particularly physical. And I thought, what am I going to do? And I got a job with Mars. And I remember being at the interview, and all of these people were there, and they were all in their pinstripe suits, and they were all using short acronyms, and they were using things like FMCG and blue chip. I had no idea what they were talking about. And I sat there with this group of people and thought, how have I ended up here? Oh, well, I need a job. I'll just keep going. And I said to the person at the end of the first sort of round of interviews, I said to the person, it was a recruitment agency who'd done the first round. And I said, why? I had nothing to lose because I thought I'm never going to get this because they all talk a different language. Why did you interview me? And he said, oh, I've never met anybody. He said, I'm retiring and I've got nothing to lose. And he said, I've never met anybody who has an outdoor background and a sporting background who hasn't been successful in business. So he said, I thought I'd throw you in the mix and see what happened. So I got through that interview and I got through the next interview and then landed my job in the corporate world a bit kind of wide-eyed and thought, I've taught like classes of 30 unruly children. How hard can it be to go and work in a business? And I'd got a sales job to go and sell some stuff. It can't be that difficult. So I was just very naive at the time. And then 16 years later, I left Mars. So I spent 8 years in the commercial side of the business. And then there was an opportunity 8 years later to move into more of a training role and a people development role. And building on the fact that I had now the commercial understanding, it was great because it allowed me to bring the two things together. It allowed me to bring together my real passion for developing people as well as my, commercial understanding. And because I was an internal coach, I had the opportunity to say to one-to-one and, coachees, should we go for a walk outside? And we just went for 2 to 1 of our offices is in the Midlands, and it's kind of in the middle of loads of fields. So we just went for a little tootle around the fields while we were having a conversation. And then as the role sort of developed and I started working with teams and we were doing high performance collaboration teamwork, I sort of became known within the organization for, if you want to do some team stuff, go and do it with Lesley because she'll take you on a holiday. And I'm being mildly flippant, but I would use venues like I'd take a cottage down in, Devon or Cornwall, or we would go to a camping barn in Wales, or, we would go to a bunkhouse in Scotland, and we would have our high performance team experience somewhere rural, and we would sit in fields and have the conversation in a field, or we would walk down a path and, we would use that walking to have other conversations. And I think initially people were like, that sounds like quite good fun. She's going to take us on holiday. And then they began to realize actually it was significantly more impactful than the type of team building thing that you might have in a Hilton, for example. And then I took a year out and I sailed around the world as part of the Clipper Round the World yacht race. And I did it because I wanted a challenge. I wanted something that would push me to my limits and to see what I could experience. So I was just chatting to Anna Marie about her amazing, long distance running, and I have a big passion, and I have people who can do that. I kind of have on a pedestal because I think, God, it really takes something to do that. And I wanted to give myself the opportunity to experience what might that be like. What might it be like to push to your limits in an outdoor environment? So I took part in that yacht race. And then I was very lucky because I got the sabbatical, so I came back to Mars and sort of had even more fueled up about, this outdoor stuff. Like there's so much value in it. and you know, brought back some of the lessons I'd learned from that race and was weaving that into the teamwork. And then thought, I'm a bit fed up of sitting in all these internal corporate meetings. Like, I know I love my team development, I love my executive coaching, but I'm having to sit in meetings that aren't interesting me and that don't give me the fulfillment and don't allow me to add value in the way that I believe I can, because I'm sitting talking about year-end performance, which is very critical to business, but wasn't hugely inspirational for me. So I thought, right, I'm going to give it a go on my own. And I left Mars and started Brave Conversations. And to be honest, when I started, I was like, oh my God, what's all the stuff that I've learned that I can do? I'll offer everything to everybody and hope to God it works out and that I can pay the mortgage. So I did that, and I still do that. So I still say, you know, here's all of the things that I can offer. Here's the stuff I'm experienced in, and here's what I think I'm good at. And let's, if I'm appropriate for you, then, you know, let's find out a way where I can support your organization and support your business. And where I can, within those things, I'm always bringing in nature or encouraging people to do it in a different venue or in a different way. And then more recently, I was due to, because I'm so passionate about coaching outdoors, and I've done a lot of coaching outdoors work, both way back when and then more recently. I was hearing coaches saying, you know, I want to work outdoors, but how do you start? Where do you go? You know, what are the first steps? And I thought, oh, I know a bit about this, and I'm pretty passionate about it. And because I'd experienced Ashridge and the beautiful grounds at Ashridge, I thought, oh, I'll run a couple of days at Ashridge and I'll invite some people along and we'll give people that experience of coaching outdoors in terms of them experiencing it. And then I'll share some top tips of, this is some things that I've done. And then COVID happened and we couldn't all get together. And initially I thought, how do you help people coach outdoors if you can't see them in person and be outdoors and give them that experience? But again, I thought, well, nothing to lose, I'll give it a go. So I just took the content that we were going to do on the 2 programs in person and I moved them to being an online program and created an online experience where people still had the opportunity to be in the outdoors, experiencing it for themselves and then coming back and sharing some of those learnings. And I guess that sort of brings us up to where we are now. So that's maybe not such a potted history, apologies. Maybe a bit of I've been chatting forever. That's how I've got to where I am now.
And thank you for really just diving into detail. And it is one of those questions we do get from our listeners, is in a way an insight into other coaches' experience and their journey from, you know, whether it's from a different career path or whether they've known straight off that they wanted to work within the coaching world, whether they've come from the outdoor industry, whether they're more specialized in NLP, whether they've got a fascination for blue health. It's like we all have our own experience and knowledge, and how does that all kind of become intertwined? And that's the reason why we love to kind of set the stage with, you know, what are your childhood memories, because ultimately that is what shapes us to the person we are now. And the way that you were talking about going and studying to be an outdoor education teacher, so you didn't have to be indoors, very much resonated with me. I basically joined the army, so I didn't have to sit in an office. I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do, but I knew that what I didn't want to do, and actually the army offered a way out. And I got, you know, so much from that. And again, the skills and the training and the development and the personal development that kind of came with it. So it's the threads that then kind of come together. And often, you know, when you're in the moment, you don't really know where you're going, but then with hindsight, you see the golden thread of kind of how it all comes together. And for you, it'd be really interesting to kind of just dive into a little bit more detail about this kind of this niche area that you found yourself in now, which is ultimately offering kind of coach training for other coaches who want to go into the space, because it is something that is sorely missing. And, you know, part of the reason that we established this podcast was so that we could, you know, share other people's stories and, you know, share the evidence, share the top tips, share the case studies, because everyone wants to know what kind of goes on within a coaching conversation outdoors. Introducing them, it would be just a real insight. I know you've got a couple of coaching programs and they're online, and, you know, it'd be great just to share a bit about our listeners, you know, what is involved.
Good question. So maybe if I just explain the two programs, that might be helpful. So one of them is called Getting Started, Coaching Outdoors, and that is literally for anybody, and coaches or line managers, because I think lots and lots of line managers now either have a passion or an interest for coaching, or there is an expectation from businesses that a line manager will be able to coach. So it isn't about me teaching them to coach, just for clarity. It is about helping them to take their coaching conversations outside. So if they've only ever sat in an office and never had a conversation, even walking around the car park, even that is a great place to start. It's, now because Coaching Outdoors is becoming quite a popular topic and there's a big movement into Coaching Outdoors, I hear things like, somatic experience, nested cycles, role in the universe. And I think if you're a coach that's never stepped out the door and had a conversation with somebody walking around the park, that's quite daunting, and it can be quite, it can create quite a barrier, I think, because for some coaches, they're wondering, do I need to take a rucksack? Do I need to take pen and paper? What do I do with my because when I'm with somebody in the office, I might be writing notes. How do I do that when I'm outside? How do I contract for what happens if it rains? Or how do I contract for, should I take them up a hill or should I just take them a walk around the park? And helping coaches, or as I say, line managers, get to a place of feeling comfortable and confident that they can take a coaching conversation into the outdoors and know that they feel equipped to do that. And also there is an invite, very much like the question that you've asked at the beginning, which is what's your experience of the outdoors and how is it congruent for you to be taking people outside? So that's part of that Getting Started program, as well as inviting people to consider what's their own practice of being in the outdoors. How often do you go out? How often do you walk? And what do you do when you're walking? And how can you start to use those experiences for self-coaching so that they have, a good base of, I get it, I get why it works. And I've experienced it for myself and I've had some practice with some clients. So that would be Getting Started program. And then the Nature as Co-facilitator program is much more aimed at those coaches for whom, when they hear things like, nature as partner or nature as coach, or the somatic experience, or the nested cycles within a forest or the universe, they're drawn to that and they're excited about that, and they think, oh yeah, I want to play with that and practice with that and have more of that. I want to understand how I can bring in metaphor or mirror, or I want to understand I want to give them some thought to what's my place in the universe and my connection to the much, much bigger system of all of this. How does my DNA fit with the DNA of the tree, and how am I in relationship to that tree? So all of that would be what is in the second program. But again, it's very much built on those coaches having their own experience and then sharing those experiences with the people who are on the program with them and learning from others, because I'm always learning. It's such a rich area. I learn every single time, every program that I run, every conversation that gets shared, every question that gets asked, I'm learning. And there are so many wonderful practices and wonderful ideas about great questions we can ask or great tools that we can use. And it's just a really rich experience, I think, for everybody.
It's great actually that you mentioned there about things like challenges and stuff like that, because currently I'm being rained on, and I wasn't being rained on when we started this conversation, and it's this cloudy cube. So I'm sort of adjusting my environment to sort of keep my laptop dry. I've got a scarf I'm using, but it's fascinating because those are the kind of things that and those things that you mentioned there about what clothes should I wear? Should I take a rucksack? How do I take notes? We have been asked these questions so many times ourselves, and people are really interested in taking their coaching conversations outside, or people who are listening to the podcast and they're like, will somebody talk about practicalities, and will somebody answer questions about what tools and techniques can I use outdoors? And I think it's brilliant that there are people like yourself out there that are creating training around this as well, or workshops. So as Anna Marie said, you know, we've created this podcast because we want to share this expertise with people, from people like yourself who have been doing it for a long time, so that people who are thinking about trying it might go, oh, okay, so there is a question, there is an answer there about, you know, what are the different ways I might or may not take notes when I'm coaching, or what do I do if it rains, or whatever it might be. So having those kind of training programs available is brilliant. And I'm hoping that we'll have, you know, there'll be more to choose from in the future. But thinking about the challenges aspect, what kind of challenges do the people who go on your programs experience whilst they're outdoor coaching? What kind of things do they come across, and how do you help them to kind of deal with those challenges and hopefully therefore deal with any challenges that might come up when they're coaching outdoors themselves?
Good question. I think the weather's quite a big and obvious one. Like you were talking about, it's raining for you. So one of the challenges is, well, I've planned this outdoor session and it's now hideous weather. What do I do? So, and again, it comes back to the contracting. What contract did you have in place with your client in the first place? And things like having a backup plan. So I don't think I've ever considered running a coaching outdoors session where I haven't got a backup plan of what I'm going to do if the weather is really inclement. And I think the reality is it doesn't happen that often. Most of the time the weather is actually very kind to us. I've had one session that was cancelled from being outside because it was a hailstorm and we moved inside. But if I hadn't had a backup venue, it would have gone horribly wrong, because they'd driven for an hour to meet me and there wasn't hailing when they left. So I think that's one of the big challenges. I think some other challenges that come up are around venue choice. There's a real simple basic of toilets. And nobody talks about toilets because they're not sexy or glamorous. Where are the toilets? What do you do if the toilets are shut, especially in COVID times? What are you going to do about that? Wild wheeze, is that appropriate? Is that inappropriate? What do you do about that? So those, I mean, again, it comes back to the basics. I guess it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If it's soaking wet and you're not focused on the conversation because you're too busy thinking about how wet you're getting, or if you're worried about the fact you or your client need a wee, you're not going to be having a successful coaching conversation. So we invite people, I guess preparation would be one of the things for that. I think also helping coaches to understand, where are they comfortable? What's their comfortable space? So in terms of the environment and in terms of clothing or safety blanket, what's the thing that you need, and identifying what that is. So if one of your safety blankets is taking notes, it's knowing that that's a safety blanket for you and knowing how are you going to overcome that when you're outdoors and what tools and techniques are you going to use to support you. If one of your safety blankets is actually when it's really a big and exposed landscape, as a coach, I feel quite exposed and I'm not comfortable. So it's about making sure that they are in a comfortable place so that they can be fully resourced to serve their client. But I think people, unless you've provoked them with those questions, they probably haven't thought about that. And it will only be once they're out with a client over a few times, they go, that wasn't quite working, but I don't know why. Or shoes, making sure you've got comfortable shoes. And again, it comes back to that being fully available for your client, not thinking about a blister. Other challenges might be that, clients might be less comfortable being outdoors. And it's about helping coaches to become clear on what's appropriate and what isn't. Because inherently we've got power in the coaching relationship. And I know there's lots of work that's been done on the coach's power in the coaching relationship. But if we're saying to a coachee, how do you feel about having a session outdoors? And then we give a little list of, here's all the great stuff that nature can offer to us in terms of wellbeing and mental health. And the likelihood is that client is going to say yes. But the reality is they might not be that comfortable. But they've said yes because you've given them a great list of why they should do it and because of the power in the relationship. And I think being aware of that is important. I don't there's no holy grail to fix it, but I think raising awareness is important. an awareness of the variety of environments and what they might bring up for clients. So what do you do if you're in an environment and suddenly a client is triggered by whatever it is, that dogs come up and they're scared of dogs, or a robin has flown past and robins for them evoke a memory of somebody who's passed away, or it's a less controlled environment than being indoors. There's more stuff that can happen. So I think just being aware of that and starting to think about how can we equip ourselves to manage that would be the main things.
And thank you for giving an insight into the challenges. It's very much, it's not just kind of heading outdoors. There's a lot of kind of planning and preparation, and that's something that we're really kind of keen to emphasize, to kind of talk through. So the fact that you've got these courses and very much people are coming together and bring their experience, and you're kind of like facing them head on, you know, really interested to see, you know, for the people who are then moving on, how it has kind of supported their practice. And ultimately, when we look at coach training, it is predominantly indoors, sat down. I remember doing my own coach training back in 2011 in Abu Dhabi, and it was very much in a conference room setting within the lobby, and I was kind of itching to get outside, and every time I could kind of persuade one of my colleagues to, I don't even just stand looking out the window or one of the balcony areas or going for a walk around the block, I kind of really jumped at the chance, because I even knew at that point, when I hadn't even really envisaged taking my coaching practice outdoors, the movement and the fresh air for me, just that was my safe space. And we've talked a lot about safe spaces and the connection that we have to it as coaches, and then what does that bring into our practice. So kind of thinking about this and kind of in a way taking a perspective from, you know, the coaching profession as a whole, like what can we do as the outdoor coaching community to kind of in a way try and shift perception, because it's a big kind of like cultural perception, you know, coaching happens indoors, sat down. So, you know, it's great that there's more interest in it, but what else can we do?
I love it. It's such a good question. I know when I was doing my dissertation, I said I was going to do it on the outdoors, on coaching outdoors, and I was met with such a, from the faculty, not all of the faculty, but many of the faculty were, oh, that's a bit, is that safe? Is that confidential? Is that appropriate? I remember all those conversations. And you're absolutely right, because I think coaching outdoors isn't for every coach, and it is not for every client. I believe for some people, you've got to be comfortable, because the whole point of the coaching conversation is that you feel comfortable and safe enough to talk about things and to go places that you wouldn't go in ordinary conversations. And if the outdoors doesn't support you to do that, then that's not the place for you. So I completely get that. But I think you're right, more and more in terms of training, I think there should at least be a conversation about coaching outdoors as part of coach training that's offered, whomever the provider is. And there's some great examples. So at Ashridge, I go back to Ashridge again, because it's a great example of, they've got a fantastic program at Ashridge, and the grounds are fantastic. You know, they are such inspirational grounds. It's an old building set in acres of land on the Ashridge estate. And yet, whilst we used that as part of the programme, I don't think there was ever actually an official invite by any of the faculty to take the conversations outside, but it's on the doorstep. So I think even that would be, you know, a step in the right direction, even if coaching outdoors isn't actually spoken about formally as part of training. I think whomever is providing training, inviting the trainee coaches to take their conversation outside with their peers when they're doing those practice sessions, I think that in itself would be a huge step forward. Or facing a window, you know, if you're somewhere in Abu Dhabi, I imagine it was very hot outside, so like it might be inclement to go outside. So even just being in front of a window, inviting you to have the conversation where you're both either standing together or sitting together, facing the view, rather than, you know, I know not everybody faces directly opposite each other, but, you know, having that view as a partner in the conversation, even that would be a step in the right direction. Or having, I mean, ideally, wouldn't it be wonderful if everybody that was running coaching training offered a module on it? Here's a module on coaching outdoors. Wouldn't that be fantastic? Or trying to get people open to it. You know, I've spoken to some senior faculty in a variety of places, and I'm saying to them, you know, I think Coaching Outdoors is really important. Have you heard the people that are talking about it? Have you seen the growing movement in this field? Have you considered how it fits with the wider world and everything that's happening? Do you not think, and I'm being quite provocative, I'm saying, do you not think you'll be left behind if you're not including this? And sometimes I'm met with, that's interesting. Sometimes I'm met with people who are keen and yeah, they want to do something about it. And sometimes I'm met with, that's not for us, thanks. It's really varied. And I guess it's a journey, isn't it? It will happen organically. You can't force these things. People will get there in their own time, or they won't get there. And I think coaches, when they are choosing which programs to attend, if it becomes apparent in the provider that they offer Coaching Outdoors as part of the modular content, I think coaches that want that will be drawn to those providers, and coaches who don't want that or haven't thought of it might go to another provider, I guess.
It's so true, and what you said about Ashridge, it sort of rings bells with me, because I did mine at Henley Business School, so very similar, you know, gorgeous grounds, absolutely gorgeous grounds. And when I chose my masters, I knew I wanted to do my dissertation on outdoor coaching, and I knew I wanted my focus to be outdoor coaching, but there wasn't necessarily an element of that in the actual content. But the wonderful thing was Jonathan Passmore, who was my dissertation supervisor and also obviously one of the tutors and ran the course, he actually added an extra workshop one evening, which is how Anna Marie and I met each other. So he invited Anna Marie along to come and talk, and a few other people, about outdoor coaching. And it was an extra session that was added on. And it was me sitting there thinking, oh, finally, I'm meeting people who think like me and want to do that, and, you know, have been doing this for years. So I can learn from these people. And that's how Anna Marie and I got talking, and we connected afterwards. And that's how the podcast series was born. And yeah, we're talking about it all the time, that, you know, like you, wouldn't it be lovely if we could sort of provoke, I love that word, provocatively, get some of these qualification providers to include either an element of being outdoors in the program, encouraging people to take their practice sessions outdoors, or actually have a module on, be it, you know, the outdoor coaching and various aspects of it. So it's one of Anna Marie and I's, it's one of our things for the future, for one of our plans, and for maybe later on in the year. But it does also bring that idea together of the outdoor coaching community. And, you know, there aren't, as you said, there's a movement now, which is wonderful, and we're just so happy that, you know, we can, whatever we can do to help that movement as well. And obviously we've met some amazing people that we've interviewed as part of this podcast series. And we as I said to you when I emailed you, we had a wish list of people, and you were on the wish list, and various other people as well. And it's just that the idea of those people that we know have been doing this for so long, and we know are brilliant, but we also want to share you and your experiences and your insights and everything with people who are thinking, I'd like to try that for the first time. So what can we do as a community of people who are already outdoor coaching to work together as a community, but also to encourage others to join our community and give it a go, and sort of, you know, consider actually taking their coaching practice outdoors?
I think, well, thank you for the flattery. As I said to you in my response, like, flattery will get you, get you out there. I think in terms of inviting other, and like trying to gather a group together, or it's kind of like, how do you get everybody that's interested all in the same place so that we're all accessible? If I'm honest, I'm not sure. Maybe this sounds a bit pessimistic, and I'm not normally pessimistic. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if it's possible to connect everybody, because I think some people are drawn to, you know, contributing to a podcast. Some people are drawn to contributing articles. Some people are drawn to giving away free training. Some people are, no, I'm not doing any of that. Thank you very much. I'm quite happy doing what I do with the clients that I've got, and I don't want to be part of a community. Some people want more learning, and they're like, oh, that's great, Alex, you're doing this, and I don't do that. I want to find out a bit more about that. So I think what drives people is quite different. I think organically, I think it will grow. It's a bit like if I think about nature and, you know, nature systems, you've got kind of the woodland, and you've got the sea, and the woodland doesn't, I don't imagine, talk to the sea very often. I mean, I'm not an expert, I'm not a naturalist, but they probably don't get together very often, but yet they're both out there doing their nature thing. and they're serving different communities in different ways. I'm not sure like it's going to be possible to get everybody together on the same page in the same place, perhaps. So I'm a bit of a believer in it will just organically happen. There will organically be a groundswell, but there might be different pockets of it, and people will be drawn to those different pockets. And in the way that we could all say, you know, we're outdoor coaches and we coach outdoors, but I imagine we're all slightly different within that, because we've got our personalities, we've got the way that we do it, the locations that we use. And I think there's real richness in that, because people will find a way to find what they need and get what they want. I think the thing that's critical at the moment is lots of people are talking about it in a variety of ways. And I think what you're doing is fantastic in terms of you're inviting people who are passionate to come and talk and share their experiences and resources. So you're already creating a hub. And I suspect there will be a variety of hubs. And eventually some of those hubs will merge together and become bigger hubs. But there'll always be sort of satellite hubs. And then there'll be the people who quietly do their own thing in their own way and don't shout about it or talk about it or connect with others, because that's just their way of doing it. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but
Yeah, it did, absolutely.
It's all about how do things progress, how do things move forward, and I'm always kind of in a way curious about within the coaching community, that's, you know, ethos of collaboration and support amongst each other balanced against competition, because ultimately we're all in the same market. And how you get the two, and I love kind of Tim Ferriss's description of collaboration, when you're kind of bringing it together and you're all kind of raising the bar for everybody and you're all learning and growing and developing together, because ultimately that is kind of what it is all about. And this leads kind of really quite nicely into one of our kind of beginning to wrap up questions, which is all about learning and growth and development and resources. And, you know, it would be great for you just to share a little bit more details about where our listeners can find you and their courses. I think we'll have a lot of interest in that, but also what other resources might you have had, you know, on your coaching journey into the outdoor space that you have found particularly valuable in, you know, developing and refining your practice.
Thank you. Just before I share the resources, I'd just like to build on this competition and yet collaboration. So there's a wonderful lady that I worked with called Bridget Farrens, and she talks about there is nothing wrong with the abundance of collaboration. She said we're all standing on the shoulders of giants at the end of the day. Very little is original nowadays. And if it is original, but you haven't shared it or collaborated with somebody else to create it, what value is in it? And it was a real moment for me of, she sort of opened the door for me to say, come on, let's all do it together. You know, let's share as much as we can, because there are so many clients out there. There's more clients out there than there are coaches, and anybody could ever serve. Isn't it wonderful that we can all share and just accept that the right client will find the right coach? But that right coach will be in a better place and a more resourced place if we've all supported each other. And ultimately, we're all standing on the shoulders of the people that went before us, of the great people that went before us. And we might tweak something or learn something and drop it into the ocean of, you know, resources. But ultimately, we're all only better because of the people who've shared what went before. And I just thought that's such a nice mindset to have. In terms of resources, so I guess there's lots of articles on my Coaching Outdoors website. So it's coachingoutdoors.com. There's lots of articles on there which people might find interesting. There's some by myself, but there are also some by some other people. I guess so I just have to recommend somebody. So I did some NLP training as part of my development journey. And there's a lady called Sue Knight, and she works very organically. She works in such a natural way with NLP, and she works, uses lots of outdoor locations. She's amazing. So if anybody ever wants to do any NLP trainings, look up Sue Knight, and she's one of the biggest role models for me in my life and in my career. I've learned so much from her. So she'd be a great resource. And then a couple of books that I have found really valuable. So there's a book called With Nature in Mind, and it's by Andy McGeaney. And I love that book. It's so well written, and it's an ecotherapy manual for mental health professionals, but ultimately it's very applicable to coaches. And she's got lots of lovely tools in there at the back. It's got lots of lovely tools at the back of, you know, really simple exercises, which are super. And then Ruth Allen has recently published a book, and it's called Grounded. It's kind of like a coffee table book, but there's loads of fantastic things in there. Both in terms of inspiration of, you know, just even that moment of nature, us looking at a picture is so resourcing for us, and then some beautiful text and research and exercises within that book, which I think are fantastic.
And it's great to sort of hear what inspires the people that we interview, is also hearing who your inspiration, where your inspiration comes from, who your sort of heroes are, and that sort of thing. And it's lovely for us to, because and as well the resources you've shared there are different to the resources that we've had suggested from other people as well. And we want to create the resources page that we have on the website and just keep adding and building, so that, as you said, depending on where you're coming to outdoor coaching from, or what your interest is or your background, there should be something on that resources page that really just piques people's interests, whether it's a book or an article or a sort of a TED talk, or just researching another person who's inspired somebody else. All of that just really, it's one of those spiders webs. It just, everybody then kind of helps somebody else to learn and carry on. And you mentioned a couple of times there about the learning aspect, and Anna Marie and I were always saying that we're almost a little bit we're very lucky with the podcast, because every time we interview somebody we learn so much, and then when we listen back to the podcasts for when we're actually about to launch them, we learn again, because we listen to it as a listener, as opposed to obviously having the conversation in it when it's first recorded, and the insights that we're getting and hearing, we're very lucky as well. So we're both very big on continued learning. So it's just been wonderful for us to learn so much from you, Lesley, and just hearing your backstory and how you come to outdoor coaching in the first place, and that as well. I meant to say at the time, actually, I think a lot of people ask us, how do we start? Where do we start outdoor coaching? And Anna Marie and I always say, just start with whatever works for you. Just get yourself out and about. As you said, if you're not capable of climbing up a mountain, don't take your coaches up a mountain. Try it out, but try it out safely and in a way that works for you, and then it can evolve from there as well. So and one thing I do want to mention as well is so your website is coachingoutdoors.com, and our website is coaching-outdoors.com, which is really interesting, because it's one of those things. It's wonderful. When we were looking for our website, actually we found it quite hard to find a website domain name, because wonderfully there are so many websites out there that are actually about outdoor coaching. So I recommend to anybody as well, just start Googling outdoor coaching, and you'll find Lesley, and you'll find us, and you'll find such a raft of other resources there and other people doing their outdoor coaching. So yes, thank you very much for joining us today, Lesley. It's been wonderful to have you on our podcast, and as I said, we're on our original wish list, and now we can say we've finally met you on virtually, of course. And I also want to highlight as well to our listeners, those of you who aren't aware, is that Lesley actually won one of the EMCC awards last year for her coaching program. So we are with an award winner as well. So we want to congratulate you on behalf of everybody from the coaching community, but huge congratulations for winning that award as well, and for just highlighting outdoor coaching with that award as well. So thank you so much, Lesley, and hopefully we will speak to you again on a future podcast.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much. It's lovely to talk to you both, and a privilege to have been invited. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So if you enjoyed what you've heard, like it, share across your network, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and LinkedIn community page, the Coaching Outdoor Podcast. Thanks so much in advance for your support.